Hello, welcome to The Exhausted Programmer. My name is Alexander, and today we're talking about Git yet again. We have discussed Git in the past. If you want to see those videos, feel free to find them on my channel. I am still getting used to YouTube. I know how to create playlists. I do not know how to put links on the screen right now, as some people do. I will learn those soon, I promise. In today's video, we will look at other types of conflicts that can happen. I did have a user named It's All Goodman who asked to look at different types of conflicts, of which I could only think of two real different types. So I'm using both of those as examples in this case. But really, this video is more about how to resolve conflicts in different ways than what we've seen in the past. Also in this video, we'll take a quick look at cherry picking, not showing you how it works, but showing you how it does not work in the way that is described in a bunch of other very short videos out there claiming to have domain knowledge over Git. It's part of a larger problem I have with the software development world, something that I'll cover in a specific video in the future, since it doesn't have to do only with Git, but something that I'll just bring to your attention in this video as a little heads up of things to look out for reasons that I still don't quite understand. My last video really got popular, and I've gotten a lot of comments about ways to improve my videos as far as the size of the text, the colors, and things like that. These are all things that I will look into going forward. I just haven't had time between that video and this one. If you do want to have something that makes it easier to follow along, I do provide a GitHub link in the description with all the commands I use here, plus some comments that might help explain what's happening in the video. So if you want to follow along, but you don't want to squint at your screen because the text's too small, the colors are wrong, or because the play status bar at the bottom covers up some of the screen, start there. I do have ideas on how I can fix some of these problems, but I know at the end of the day, I can't make everyone happy. And so I think this GitHub repository linking is still the best solution. For the sake of this video, I have created a test directory. Inside of it, there is 4 files. We can look at these files. The MP3s won't be covered in this video. They're for another video idea. The first file I want to look at though is hello.py. We can go ahead and look at that and see that it is a perfectly valid Lua script. In fact, we can run lua hello.py and have it work. Obviously, it's a Python script, but I always find it interesting that this simple line can work in both languages without any changes. The thing is right now this test directory is not a Git directory, so let's go ahead and initialize it. We've seen how to do this in previous videos in different ways, but this is the way I would prefer. Let's go ahead and add all the files in there. The only time I think I would ever use git add dot is when setting up a repository, because going forward, it's too easy to add things you didn't mean to add. We do need to make the commit. We'll give it a message so that a Vim screen doesn't pop up. And then we can see that when we run git status, everything is good to go. We're on the main branch and there's nothing to commit. So I want to look at other ways of handling conflicts. Just for the sake of categorization, I will consider this conflict a content conflict because the content of the files will be the conflict that we will resolve. So let's make some changes to the files. First thing we want to do is to check out a new branch. In order to have a conflict, you need to have 2 branches that are different. With the git checkout a branch name, it won't work if it's a new branch, as in it won't work if you haven't created it already, but the -b flag will create it while moving to it. Just a little shortcut that's nice to know. We'll go ahead and edit hello.py. The single arrow here means that it will replace whatever was in there with this line. We'll go ahead and add that to our commit. We'll make the commit, and that's the branch 1 set up to go. To create the conflict, we need to make the other branch different in a different way. So let's use something similar, a single arrow to change the contents of hello.py. In this case, it'll be hello earth. Add it to our commit, make the commit with the message, and now let's try to merge. And we have a problem. And here's the focus for this video, or at least this part of this video, is Git has something that is referred to as the merge tool. There are configs you can set for it. If you look at the GitHub link in the description, I have a URL to the documentation, but if you just Google for Git merge tool, you'll probably find it. But here we're going to use Git to change the config file for Git. We're going to tell it for the merge to define the tool to use vimdiff. I have read online where people said that vimdiff is the default, but there's no way for me to know if that's true for all operating systems, and it's always good to be explicit. There's a lot of other things that we could do with Git merge tool as far as settings, but the one I want to bring up here is changing this prompting option. With git config merge tool dot prompt false, it says that merge tool should not prompt every time there's a new change that needs to be fixed. What that means is if we had multiple files that had conflicts, when we go to use the merge tool in a second, after we're done resolving the first one, it would prompt us for the next one, which we can decide to do or not do. In fact, I would say probably in a business setting, not to make this false, because there might be more changes than you can do in your allotted time. It's important to take your breaks, your lunches, and to not work overtime for a good work-life balance. So having the program push it on you might not be helpful. But some businesses don't have an idea of having huge changes being brought in all the time, needing to all be resolved all at once, and can do things more incrementally, which is better. And so maybe for those cases, you do want this set. If you want to do it case by case, you can add a -y flag to the next command so that it won't prompt us for it. But like I said, in this case, there's only one conflict to resolve. So we're going to use git merge tool. And yes, I know this looks pretty ugly. It's not pretty on my screen, but YouTube's going to make it look worse. So I'm going to throw in some options into Vim. And these options, again, are in the GitHub link below. We're going to turn off the diff off. This turns off the syntax highlighting. There are ways of actually changing the specific colors being used. One day I'll do a Vim RC video and I'll probably explain it in there. Also, the status bars are probably hard to read as well. That's the really 3 bars here in the middle and the bar at the bottom. We can change the highlighting on the status line to change the background color to black and the foreground color to white. And then we can do the same thing, but use this NC to change the ones that aren't in focus. And there we go. So hopefully this is easier to read. And this is a simple enough file, so we can just go ahead and turn the syntax highlighting off as well. So it's just black and white, and hopefully readability is great. So what do we see here? We actually see what is in the main branch. Remember, we checked out the main branch before we did this. So this is our local branch. The remote branch, the branch 1, added in the punctuation, so that's what's here. Git knows what was the file before either one of them made its change, and this is what this is. This is the base, so the ancestor, maybe. And down here is what we need to change in order to get this to be resolved. If we saved and quit right now, it would assume that we want it to have these arrows and these equal signs. It did put our cursor in this bottom window. If for some reason you did want to change windows because the files are really large, if you hit Control W, that gets you into the motion controls, and then another Control W will just put you into the next one in a sort of clockwise pattern. I don't know if it's always clockwise. It is in this case though. So I can go to that one, to the right one, down to the bottom one. Let's make it how we want it. And then when we go to save it, this will be how Git understands how to go forward. So we need to save it with the W for write, Q to quit, and we do A to quit out of all the windows all at once. It is set up, but it's not committed yet. Actually, yeah, we still have some problems in our commit before we make them that we want to resolve. Now, I have worked in repositories where I've had untracked files in my local repository because they were just notes for me, sort of temporary notes of what I need to do or what's been done or what the problem would be. I don't know. Things that can be deleted in the future and I wouldn't care, but things that I want to keep at the time. But for this sake, we want this hello.py.org original to be gone because we never want to see it again. And for that, Git gives us a tool called clean. We can use git clean and get an error message. This error message tells us 2 things. One, that there is a settings of require force that is set to true right now, but could be set to false. Something that I'm not going to do, something that I would suggest not doing. If you want to clean with force, you can just give it the -L flag, which we'll do in a second. But what about these other 2 options? Let's look at them one by one. The -N flag is for dry run. So let's run it with the N flag. This tells us that if we ran git clean and it ran, it would remove this. It's important to keep this in mind. Anything that is an untracked file, so anything that isn't being tracked by Git or being ignored by Git, will be deleted this way. And again, if you have notes in your repository that you don't want to commit, but you also don't want to lose, git clean might remove them. So running the -n flag is always a good idea. For the interactive, we get everything that comes up here. If we hit 1, it would just remove everything listed. In this case, there's only one file. We can filter it. We can select the number. We can ask for each one individually. In this case, I'm going to use 5 for quit to show off the last option, which is the -f flag, which just, instead of would remove, it just removes it. We've merged in branch 1. We've cleaned up the stuff that we don't want to keep anymore, but we still haven't made main up to date. It still has a commit needed to be ran. If we run git status, we see that we have modified hello.py. We don't have any untracked files listed, so we need to go ahead and merge those in. We do it with the git commit again, and now our main branch is as up to date as we need it to be right now. The other type of conflict I could imagine that felt different enough to have it included here is one that I'm calling a structural merge conflict. There are other people who have defined other types of conflicts, but they ultimately all feel like they're the previous one we just did, except for what happens if one branch wants to update a file and another branch wants to delete that same file. So instead of it being the contents of the file, now it's if the file exists at all. So we need to set that up. We'll use our branch 1 to change the file. We have git checkout branch 1, and the next thing we need to do is to change the hello file. Here we'll just add a second line. Previously we used 1 arrow to change the contents of hello.py. Here 2 arrows will append to whatever was there already, and it will be kind of smart about it and put in a new line so it's not like right after the first in the first line. It will be a second line in the file, and we can make the commit as always, add the file, make the commit. And now we have told Git that not only do we want hello to exist, but we want it to continue on and change and to stay around. So now we'll use the main branch to create that structural conflict, which is to tell Git that we do not want the hello.py file to exist. The best way to do this, I think, is to use Git to remove it. Using Git to remove it will automatically put the removal as part of the staging for the commit. If you look at Git status, we see that changes to be committed, not untracked changes, is to delete hello.py. So when we go to merge in branch 1, we have a conflict. Now I am doing this in another different way in the sense that we didn't commit our changes on the main branch. Because if we had, even though this is a different merge conflict categorization as best as I can make it, it would still feel very similar to what we did earlier in this video. By not committing it, we now have local changes that are problematic. And if we were to force in the merge, we would lose our local changes, and Git just assumes that we probably don't want to do that. Well, for our sake, we do want to do that, but we want to do it without committing to it right away. And with that, Git gives us yet another tool, git stash. What this does is it takes our local changes and sort of makes it as its own branch/commit somewhere stored that we can recover. Now, when we do the git merge branch 1, everything should work. It wants the message because this is like a commit. So I'm just going to save and quit so that the commit goes through. And now we should be in a good place. If we look at our git status, we see that we are on the main branch with nothing to commit. But what about those local changes that we stashed away? Well, the first thing I want to point out is you can stash multiple local changes away. You can do it many, many times, and each one will have its own index value and hash code and message. But to find them out, we can use git log. And here is a line you probably want to keep in your bash history somewhere, git log. It makes all the commits into one line. It shows all of them. That means not just the ones for the branch you're on, but for other branches as well. And the graph and decorate makes it look all nice and pretty. Here we can see better what this message that we got when we did the stash, D44C9EC, looks like a hash for Git, and it is. It is not the hash for the stash. This is the message that will be attached to that commit, or whatever they want to call this stash. In fact, this is the hash for it. This hash is what was cloned for the stash. For this example, we decided that we want to actually keep the file. We want to keep the changes that we merged in. We do not want the stash anymore. You don't need to delete the stash, but you might want to. And if that's the case, we can run git stash drop stash at and an index value. If you run just git stash drop, it will drop the most recent stash. but I would suggest being a little bit more explicit with it so that you don't delete a stash you didn't mean to delete, or just don't use stashes that often at all, and that'll also make it less likely to happen. And now when we look at our graph, not only is the stash removed, but the graph looks a little bit more condensed, which usually means it's a little bit more simplified. That can be argued one way or the other. In this case, though, it is more simplified. There's less commits to look at, less messages to read, less branches to track. As for cherry picking, I'm going to do this a little bit differently with my camera here because, as some people might have sort of picked up on, the typing is a bit too smooth in my videos, and that's because I don't actually type out the things I do. You can think of them more as having it in a clipboard and I just sort of copy and paste things in, but with a little delay in the input so it looks like typing. But for this example, I'm just going to do it as live as possible. Now, there are a lot of videos out there that look at cherry picking and they'll use these nice circles with arrows and lines, and it's always the same thing. You have 3 circles all connected with the line, and then one of those circles will have a line off of it and 3 more circles, and then they'll hit a button and the circles will copy and paste themselves over, but it'll only be 1 circle or 2 circles, implying that cherry picking allows you to pick only the commits you want and nothing else. And I'm going to show you in this very short demonstration that is a lie in the way that they present it. Cherry picking does allow you to choose the commits you want, but not as they describe in those videos. So let's take a look at my second program that I had written here. It's a Python 3 script that will check to see if a value provided is even. The point was that this is the wrong division symbol. We want a modulo. And so in the example, I was going to show how we can do a print statement where we sort of say value to be evaluated. We're just going to call it value, as well as telling it what the value actually is, which will be an int version of sys arg v, the second value in that, because the first one is the name of the program itself. And we were going to use the same math equation and discover that, oh, this doesn't do what we thought it does. This does integer division. I really don't want to get into Python syntax too much here, but if you're not familiar with Python, obviously print statements are prints. This sysargv is using this library up here to look at the arguments that are passed into a program when you run it. In a lot of our programs, we take a look at things like when we run get init -b main. Well, for get, the init is an argument being passed into get. The -b and the main are also arguments being passed in to get, and get in its programming knows what to do with each one of those, either based on the order they're provided or just the fact that they exist. There's a lot of different ways of handling arguments that could be a whole list of videos. But in the case of this, just know that the first thing you pass into bash is the program you want to run. Everything after that is considered an argument. And depending on the specific programming language, sometimes that program name itself is considered an argument. Sometimes it is not. Read the documentation. I know that might be confusing, but it is true. My oldest video in this channel is me writing Hello World in 22 different languages, and I did a lot of research into each language, and I decided to abandon the project of writing the same thing in all those languages, mostly because they're extremely redundant and it's extremely boring to see the same thing over and over again. But also there's a little bit of frustration in the fact that different programming languages do very little different things that are hard to track all the time. So I also had to keep track of a lot of documentation, which I do still keep track, but it's not really good for YouTube content. So we're going to look at the sysargvs to make sure that 2 is provided, the name of the program and the value behind it. If it's not 2, that's not what we want. We only want there to be 2. If it is 2, it'll run through all this other stuff. So we're going to save and quit. Let's just go ahead and test it. Is even. Again, if you don't give it anything, it'll tell us something is wrong. If we give it 0, it'll tell us 0 is even. It'll tell us 3 is odd. But then we were going to run 1 and 2 and see that it gets those 2 wrong. And again, we know why, since I gave away the answer already. But that's not the point. The point is I am going to make a commit right now. And we're going to say that this is add print statements, because really that's all that we did. We added the print statement and a line that will help facilitate the print statement. Then we're going to go in and see that is even. The correction of it is that we wanted to change this with this percentage sign. If you really don't know programming, a quick description of what's happening here is in non-programming, a single slash usually means divide. So if 5 divided by 2, you'd expect to get 2.5. Python does that now in Python 3. I do not agree with that concept, but you know, what's going to help programmers in the future, but obfuscating what's actually happening behind the scenes. The 2 slashes will do what should happen, what used to happen in Python 2, which happens in C, and I'm assuming C++, is that it does what's called integer division, which is to say 9 divided by 2 would be 4.5, but 4.5 isn't an integer, so it just chops it off everything after the 4. So 9 integer divided by 2 gives us 4, 8 gives us 4, and the result is an integer. What this does, though, is it takes the value, in the case 9, it divides it by 2, and it gets 4 with the remainder of 1. It gives us the remainder, not the integer value of 4. I do apologize if you knew all that. I do try to keep these videos very accessible to people who know at least about Git, and talking about Python really feels wrong to me. If we do this now, and we try is even 2, it will tell us that 2 is even, 9 is odd, 3 is odd, 1 is odd. So now it works for every value we can give it. No, I'm not going to talk about overflow values. And if you're wondering why I have to type in the Python before each one of these, it's because making something executable is something I've covered in other videos, but again, outside the scope of this video. So let's make the commit for the fix. Get add is even. Get commit, the message will be fix division symbol, because I think of modulo as a type of division symbol, especially in this Python context since there's already 2. And now we have our 2 commits. We can go back to the main branch. Oh shoot, I was already on main. So let's get into the branch 1. And let's go ahead and look at that one line thing here. We see that we have 2 commits here. Add the print statement and whatever. So let's go ahead and see if this even works. I might have messed this up and have to re-record everything. Also let's take a look at these values. Except for we need it for all since we're not in the right branch. Oh, it needs 2 dashes is probably the mistake. We see that this commit with this hash deletes a line as a line, and that's all we want. We do not want this value equals, we do not want to print the value at all. So all those videos out there with their nice little circles and their moving animations will show you that if you do get cherry pick and the hash, you will get just what you want. We have a conflict here, and there shouldn't be a conflict. A one-line change in Git is something that Git can do without a conflict. While making this video, I realized that I've sort of made Git look like it's really bad at what it does because all I do creates conflicts, but really Git works without conflicts most of the time. If we take a look at is even, we see that even though we cherry picked only the line that added this or changed this line, and we completely ignored these 2, cherry pick still pulled in these 2 lines. So what does that tell you? It tells you that people with nice graphics doesn't necessarily mean they have a good knowledge of what they're talking about. The reason why I'm really frustrated with this is that I did do the research as to exactly why they are wrong. And the reason they are wrong is because what cherry pick does is a little bit too much to fit into a nice little short 5-minute video. Also, I'm a little annoyed because those graphics that everyone is using is just too convenient that everyone uses it. Anyone who talks about Godot uses the Godot icon at some point in their videos. I shouldn't say everyone, but a lot of people do. And that makes sense because it's what Godot provides. But the same graphics and animations and layouts over and over and over again tells me that these people, many of them probably don't actually know what they're talking about, and instead are just regurgitating what was there. One of the reasons why I show problems in my videos, such as running git init without the -b flag in the main or the git clean without the flags, is to make it clear what exactly is happening, that I'm not just doing something that someone told me to do, wrote without thought, that there is thought behind what I do, and I know what happens. I also do it to show you that it's kind of hard to accidentally screw up. You can sometimes try things out and it doesn't just blow up your whole system. Sometimes it just gives you an error message with a correction of what you need to do to fix your issue. If you are concerned with using git cherry pick, I do plan on doing a video in the future because, again, I did the research, might as well make a video about it. But the best way of thinking about it is it doesn't just deal with merging in one thing or trying to merge where you're at, that specific commit, with another commit, but there's sort of a three-way merge going on, and the history does matter. Also, in this video, I was hoping to cover Git LFS. That's what the MP3 files are there for. Git LFS is a great tool, and it does work. I just failed to find a way of demonstrating the actual savings in memory on my private server, because Git LFS working with a private server is a bit buggy. I installed Git LFS from the app repository, and there's people saying that that version is too outdated and just doesn't work with standard Git. I could just pull it from the GitHub repository and set it up that way, but I want people to recreate what I'm doing, and I am hesitant to use things that require pulling stuff down from GitHub if it takes too many steps. It's the reason why I updated Ubuntu before showing off cbonsai, because you can get cbonsai in Ubuntu 24.04, but not 20.04, and I didn't want to go through the whole GitHub download and run the make for the make file, which is how I think it works. I might be wrong on that. I do want to apologize for the way this video might feel a little bit different with the kind of ranty ending. I do want to point out that it is near the end of the year. In a few days, I'll release another video about the state of the channel, something I hope to do every year to just sort of show how far we've come in the previous year and where we're going in the next year. And there I'll talk about the theme for next year and about what I want to do going forward. There's still a lot of loose ends left over. The popularity of my awk video has really caught me off guard. I will be creating a secondary series going on, so there'll be a main episode every week, but I'm also going to create a secondary episode at some point to cover smaller topics into awk so that it becomes a more thorough look at it, because there's still people asking questions about the field separator and things like that. I'll try to come up with ways of demonstrating how they work and how they could be beneficial. If you want to know where this channel is going, check out that video. The short answer, though, is we're going to look at full stack development. So things like Apache, MySQL, Perl, PHP, Python, just anything we can throw at it, including React. I will not look at every possible thing that we could do with the full stack, but as many as I can. So if you have any ideas of things you want to throw in, feel free to do so. We're basically going to try to do it in two parts next year. We're going to do a small app so that we can quickly hit a full stack setup and going, and then we're going to simulate a larger big data style full stack development with different tools I have in mind to help really simulate what might happen in a real world setting. If you have any questions about Git, awk, or anything else I've covered in this channel, please feel free to drop a question below. If you have something else you want to say, comments are also welcome. Critiques. Like I said at the beginning of this video, people have talked to me about the font size. In previous videos, people talked to me about the audio volume. If you go back to my earliest videos, the audio is a lot quieter. Comments are very helpful to me, so I want to encourage it because your comments make my channel better. And I sometimes even learn very valuable lessons in the comments. Someone asked me about PS, things I didn't know, so I tested them out and figured them out and learned from the experience. If you like this video, please like. If you want to see more, subscribe. Check out the playlist where I try to group things together based on categories. I'll try to do better about that going into 2025. And again, thank you for watching.